Okay, welcome back to SoulFeed. Someone who, well, she's officially a presidential candidate, Marianne Williamson. And Marianne, I'm so excited to have you back on SoulFeed. This is your fourth time on SoulFeed. It's a deep and profound honor to talk to you and to have watched you grow into being a candidate for the president of the United States.
Thank you.
And congratulations on everything that you are doing. And I'm excited to dive in with you and ask some questions about your candidacy and about this experience. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited too. It's always wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah. So, Marianne, you said as your final statement in the presidential debates, you said that Donald Trump has harnessed fear for political purposes, which is so, crystal clear to me that is exactly, and to so many people, that's exactly what he has done. And you said that you were going to harness love for political purposes. And I've watched the response. To me, that makes sense. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. I understand what love looks like as an active practice, not just as some emotion or idea or some nicety. I think though that it was lost on some people, and that they actually don't believe in the power of love. And that cynicism that people have really gets to me, that there's some part of people, good people, that believes that fear and hatred actually is so much more of the norm than love. So could you talk to us about how maybe people are underestimating just how powerful love is here, and what you mean about using it for political purposes and using it in the White House?
Martin Luther King said, "The power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." So the combination of love and power is everything. Now, you talk about how some people have made fun of it and so forth. But if you look at this astonishing explosion of memes that have occurred since the debates, the vast majority of them were not malevolent. And I think what's really interesting is how many people really did get it and how many people did hear it. Yeah, there are people who are going to mock anything like that. But there are also a lot of people, Shannon, who, however ineptly I might have expressed myself in that moment. And, I can laugh at it too. I mean, I've been on the floor laughing with some of these memes. I mean, they are hysterical. And I get it. And I do get, like, what? New Zealand, what? I mean, I get that on a certain level, it was not my best night's performance. But I also think that a lot of people were grateful to hear what I said. And interestingly enough, a lot of very mainstream press has said, she might be onto something, including an opinion piece in the Washington Post, which said, this whole spiritual but not religious health and wellness thing that's out there, if this woman can harness that for political purposes, wow. So that's what I hope that people in our larger sense of community understand. Martin Luther King talked about a coalition of conscience, people who are religious, spiritual, AA, psychotherapy, health and wellness. This isn't about how many people don't understand us. This is about how many people there are for us to harness to have real political effect right now. This is not a moment to wonder about the people who don't understand. This is a moment to understand that those of us who do understand have a presidential candidacy. And are we all joining in to do what we can to mount this? And that's, our sort of higher consciousness community has not been in the mental or behavioral habit of exerting political force. And if we do, with our money, with our buzz, with what you're doing here by having me on, something extraordinary can happen here. Not the least of which is my becoming president of the United States. Donald Trump is president. And I'm not in this to just elevate the conversation. This is too late an hour. We need to do more than elevate a conversation. We need to elevate the country. This is the 21st century, and we are at a fork in the road as a human species. And one road leads to an unsustainable future. And unsustainable means it's not sustained. It means you cannot sustain life on Earth. And the other means that we evolve into a new place. And that's our only choice. When people say how naive it is to suggest a politics where public policy, domestic and international, is based on the idea that we help each other thrive. Some people might say that's naive. I say it's naive to think that we'll even survive another 100 years on this planet if we do not. So we know that there are people who are racists and bigots and anti-Semites and homophobes and Islamophobes and xenophobes. We know they're there, and we know that someone has harnessed those forces for political purposes. But there are far more people who love. There are far more people who are tolerant and non-judgmental, or at least try to be non-judgmental and inclusive and loving and wish to be kind and compassionate and ethical and moral and want to see public policy aligned with that. There are far more of us who love than who fear. But those of us who love need to become as convicted now as those of us who fear. We need to become as adamant. We need to become as committed to the possibility of love as some people are committed to the agendas of hate. So I don't even care to talk about why some people don't get it. I want to talk about people who do get it and what we need to do now.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. And by the way, I thought your performance was good in the debates. I admired your ability to get in there and get a word in, because I was like, I want to hear from Marianne. So,
not sure I did, but I'm not a political boxer. I didn't know how to do that. Part of my prep was not, even the night before, they weren't boxing like that. But I don't think.
It's true, they weren't.
Mm-mm. So they have, who knows? I can't, I'm not here to become something I'm not. I just want to become better at what I already am.
So this idea of love and of moral ethics, of being kind to one another, of seeing the good in the other, of not assuming that everyone around us is a bad potential enemy who we need to protect ourselves against, but actually looking into the eyes of our perceived enemies and coming together as a community, as Democrats, Republicans, as human beings, to solve some of these issues that we're facing. What does that? Could you give us an example of like, you're in the Oval Office and it's in your first 100 days and it's time to get to work on making decisions from a place of love. So, okay. So there are other leaders on the stage who maybe they're saying the right things, other Democratic candidates, maybe they're saying the right things, but maybe they're not coming from that space of that moral code of love. So what does that look like in terms of policy and action as a president?
Well, I think most Americans want to be good people and loving and forgiving and kind. I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that we have gotten out of the habit of asking the question, what is it to be good, when it comes to our country? We think of goodness and ethics in terms of our personal lives, but not enough in terms of our collective. So for me, what I stress in this campaign is the fact that millions of American children live in chronic trauma, go to school every day in schools that don't even have the adequate supplies to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, chances of incarceration are drastically increased. And millions of these children go to school hungry. What does love look like? You feed the children. When you have 41 food insecure adult Americans, and 13 million of those are children, and you have millions of American children who go to school hungry, when you have children in America who are in elementary school and on suicide watch, children who psychologists say experience a level of PTSD that's no less severe than the PTSD of returning veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. What love does is, there's no mystery here. You feed those children. There's nothing mysterious here. So So right now, the United States is the only advanced country that bases our educational funding primarily on property taxes, which means that if a child lives in a privileged neighborhood, the chances of getting a very fine public education is very high. But if they don't, what's going to happen to these children? So where's the mystery about what love would do? I want, as president, for every school in America to be a palace of learning and culture and arts. I want a massive realignment of investment in the direction of children 10 years old and younger. I want a Department of Children and Youth. I want to address the chronic trauma that some children in America have before even preschool. I want wraparound services. I want trauma-involved education. I want mindfulness in the schools. I want conflict resolution. I want anti-bullying. I want restorative justice. Where's the question of what love looks like? If someone is in trouble, you help them. When you have a country as ours is now, where for the sake of $350 billion in arms sale to Yemen, we are participating through aerial support in a genocidal war that Saudi Arabia is prosecuting against Yemen, where tens of thousands of people are starving to death, many of whom are children whose pictures are all over the internet. There's no mystery what love would do. Love would not do that. Love would say, no, America has moral values. America is supposed to shine a light of moral values in the world, not be seen as a country that for the sake of $350 billion in arms sales will participate with this obviously murderous dictator, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in genocide. So it's not like theoretical. That's why I want a Department of Peace. I want to wage peace, not just endlessly prepare for war. So here is fear, racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and so forth. And here is love, repairing lives, helping one another, helping people thrive, uncapping people's dreams, unleashing people's spirits. This is not just philosophy. This is practice, and this is practical, and this is strategic.
Woo! Amen. Yes. Okay, so you just triggered 6 questions in me. So I'm going to harness my powerful interviewer here and start with one. So okay, so one thing that I think that people really miss about you, Marianne, and I'd love to hear you speak to this is she doesn't have any political experience. She doesn't have any political experience. I the first time I met you in person, well, actually no, the second time I met you in person technically was at Sister Giant. You collected thousands of people in Los Angeles with dozens and dozens of Congress people. Bernie Sanders was the keynote at that. You have been doing these Sister Giant events. You've been an activist for 35 years. Could you speak to us a little bit about your political experience? Because when I watch the news, I feel like it's being underplayed a little bit here.
Well, of course it is, because it's the same corporate elite. And by the way, you might remember that they told us that Hillary was a shoo-in. And Hillary, you couldn't have had a more qualified candidate if you're talking about the politics that those people consider all that politics is. Politics is also inspiring people. Politics is harnessing the collective imagination. If you can't create political force, if you can't create political will, then you can't make things happen no matter how good your policies are. So your ability to speak to people in a way that inspires and motivates us to join together in a collective effort. I've had 35 years of that, Shannon. That's just part of that's just part of the same system that drove us into this ditch. Now claims that only people whose careers have been entrenched for decades within the limitations of that system, that only they are qualified to drive us out of this ditch. So the first thing we need to do, if we're going to free ourselves in this country, we have to free our minds of this way that we just toe the line and acquiesce to this very boxed in corporate thing. I said at some interview the other day, I said, a bunch of yogis and philosophers didn't lead us into Vietnam and Iraq, guys. I think that was you experienced politicians. Now, I have a lot of respect well, first of all, I have a lot of respect for everybody who's running. I've met them and they're lovely people, and I don't think of myself as running against anyone. I'm running with really smart, good people. This is not about individuals. This is about a system that has brought us to where we are. And by the way, I do not believe an insider game will beat him. An insider game will not beat that outsider phenomenon. That establishment thinking has no concept what it's dealing with here.
Yeah. I'm there with you. You know, I'm a fan of Joe Biden. He spoke at my college graduation. He went to my dad's college at the same time my dad was there. I love and appreciate Joe Biden. I think he's a good guy. I don't personally, I'll just share a personal view here. I don't think he's the answer to the future of what the people of America are craving and the evolution. And I don't know what that means. Maybe it means you, Marianne Williamson, and stepping into that space. I have a client, Marianne, who's a veteran. My dad is a Vietnam veteran as well, and you know, we've got this military parade happening 4th of July, which is just wild. I was just in Israel and the West Bank, and my heart was pounding as I was being driven into the West Bank by a Israeli Jew who was breaking the law to take me there, and a war tank passed us on the left, and it was you know, it was just scary to be around that. I don't think that's something we should be flaunting. So my client said, as a veteran, I can say that as much as I'd love things to be love, light, and peace, that's not often the reality we live in geopolitically. So how would Marianne engage the current geopolitical war environment? And would she be able to wear the mantle of commander-in-chief if it came to the U.S. having to engage in conflict abroad? So, you know, this speaks to the the military industrial complex of profiting off of war. And, you know, I think that's a thing for a lot of Americans, is there's this fear that we need to protect ourselves. And of course we do. So how do you apply that as a commander in chief and with that responsibility?
My father fought in World War II, and I have great respect for the US military. I think we all do, or we should. My critique of our national security agenda is not a critique of the military. The decisions that are based on short-term profits for defense contractors, by which we bloat our military spending by hundreds of billions of dollars, these are not decisions that are made by our military. These are decisions that are made by our politicians, who have been so corrupted by the short-term profits and the profit influence of dark money by the defense contractors. That's how Washington works. I see the military like I would look at a surgeon. I think we would all agree America must have a strong military. We must have the best surgeon in the world should we need surgery. But no one has surgery just because you want to have surgery. And everyone knows you can't just fight sickness, you have to boost your immune system. So we can't just endlessly prepare for war. That's all that our defense, our national security agenda is now. Endless preparation for war. When are we going to wage peace? So the truth is we have like $750 billion on the military every year, 40 billion on our State Department, which is diplomacy, mediation, and development. And then within that, humanitarian aid is about 17 billion. And then less than $1 billion is spent on the actual skill sets that we refer to as peace building. Now, peace building statistically is proven to increase peace and decrease conflict. And the four basic factors of peace building have to do with expanding economic opportunities for women, reducing violence against women, expanding educational opportunities for children, and ameliorating unnecessary human suffering wherever possible. Because desperate people do desperate things. What do you think these people who are at the southern border, they were desperate people who were fleeing the horrifying conditions of Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. Desperate people are also more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. So as commander-in-chief, one of the things that I realized that our military commanders realize is that we don't wage peace. Then there's conflict all over. And then we say to the military, we just burden them unnecessarily and wrongfully. You guys handle it. So we need to wage peace. And I think that the military would be very, very gratified to have a president, to have a commander-in-chief, who recognizes this. Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense under George Bush, said we must also wage peace. And General Mattis, before he left the Department of Defense, said, if you're not going to fully fund the State Department, then I'm going to have to buy more ammunition. So there's nothing unsophisticated about saying you have to cultivate your health. That's not unsophisticated. Sickness is the absence of health. Health isn't the absence of sickness. And war is the absence of peace. Peace isn't just the absence of war. So to say that as commander-in-chief, to me as commander-in-chief, what I should be thinking about, I don't think that any person should think only about themselves, and I don't think any generation should think only about itself. So I'm thinking for future generations. And if we're going to just endlessly prepare for war, I'm not sure this human race will make it another 100 years.
Yeah. And isn't that the essence of fear? I'm just thinking about it on a personal level. If I'm constantly attacking people who aren't even attacking me because I'm afraid that they might hurt me, then what is my health going to look like? How many friends am I going to have if I'm going around constantly attacking people?
Well, I think there are people who wish us harm. I mean, I'm not a pacifist. And I think that when you take the oath of office of the presidency of the United States, you are swearing to do what is necessary to protect our homeland. So I don't have an inherent resistance to the use of military force. If our homeland is attacked or threatened, if one of our allies is attacked or threatened, if the humanitarian order of the world is attacked or threatened, that's you take care of your diet, you take care of exercise, you take care of your lifestyle, and you take medicine if you need it. Integrative healing in the body is not either or. And integrative healing in the society, civilization, is not either or either. There are people who seriously wish America harm. And we should be mature enough and responsible enough to realize that. But if our national security agenda is just constantly preparing for ways to deal with that, and by the way, if you really wanted to deal with that, you would never have left the Iranian nuclear arms deal. Leaving the nuclear arms deal, the Iranian nuclear arms deal, was a reckless act. And look what it has given us, including the fact that Iran said the other day that they're going on to enrich to enrich further. So we have to work with leverage. We have to work with our allies. We have to work internationally.
You said in your in the debates, you talked about how let's be very clear here, we don't have a healthcare system. America has a sickness care system. And I think many Americans are accustomed to caring for their health once they're ill and going to the doctor as a means to take care of illness. So I'm wondering, because this is a shift here in a way of thinking, how do you as president motivate people to value health and well-being? And how should
I think the fact that my saying that got so much attention, I don't agree with you that Americans don't think that way. I think Americans do think that way. I think Americans realize Americans are not stupid, Shannon. There's lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. People have Teflon in their blood in Merrimack, New Hampshire. People are not stupid. They know that there are carcinogens in the water and carcinogens in the food and carcinogens in the ground. They know about the toxins and the pesticides. They know that a lot of it has to do with our chemical policies and our food policies. I don't think I think the success of my campaign is not that I have to convince anyone, but that I'm naming something that everybody's just glad that somebody's finally saying. And that's what I was saying to you before. We're already there, Shannon. We don't have to convince anybody. That's the thing. People who get this. We are the new mainstream.
Mm,
People
mm,
who aren't saying this are the new fringe.
mm, mm. Touche, touche. Okay, so Marianne, I'm curious. How do you navigate that? You are very plugged in to this campaign and this system, and so you are constantly coming up against naysayers and people who are questioning your integrity and who you are. How do you maintain your strength as you go and you know who you are and you know what you believe, and there is nothing to say about that?
You have a twisted view of my experience. I am with people every day who are really glad I'm saying these things.
Mm,
Who are
mm.
giving me standing ovation, who are showing up at campaign events. You're just looking at Twitter. That's not reality. You know, there's two political universes. There's that dog and pony show, and then there's what's happening in people's living rooms in New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina and Nevada, and that's all that matters. All that matters is people who are going to vote in those early primaries at the beginning of next year. And if nobody was showing up at the events, then I would feel like, well, I don't even know why I'm doing this. You know, Twitter is not reality.
It's not?
Even on Twitter right now, you know, if you look at all those memes out there, only a few of them are malevolent. I mean, if you really look, there's a lot of love for this. You know, you're looking at the glass half empty here. Really amazing is, wow, this kind of thing is like catching on and being called a breakthrough candidacy. Come along, guys, come with me. You know, that's what I need from people in our community. Not like, how are we handling the people who don't like us? Like, wake up. You know, what we're asking is, how do we give further fuel to this cannonball of all the people who are like, wow, how cool that somebody's saying this. Can she do it? Can she turn that into political force? I mean, from Rolling Stone to Washington Post, I mean, in very, very sophisticated mainstream publications, they're saying, wow, I mean, if she can turn this into political force, that's really something. And that's all that people like us should be talking about, not how are we handling people. No, come on. Mm-mm. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, thank you for calling out my own cynicism as it arises.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what do we have to complain about here?
Yeah, well, and I the reason I voice these things, and I'm grateful that you're willing to have this conversation with me, is I hope that the people who are sitting on the sidelines, who might be thinking some of these things, who are in our community, get to hear you say the same thing.
You know, well, cynicism is just an excuse for not helping.
Well, and you're definitely out there, and you're meeting with people, and you're looking into the eyes of people. And, you know, I just drove across the country from Los Angeles to Hudson, New York in my car alone. And I saw people all across the country. And that was the one thing I took away was, and I've never driven through Kansas. I've never driven through Ohio and all these places that, you know, we're taught to think are so Bible Belt. People are so, you know, whatever. And I was just so amazed by the warmth and kindness and love of every single person I came into contact with.
The books that you and I read, they're reading them everywhere. I mean, it's a particular segment of the society which would have us think this is happening. You know, this whole explosion of 21st century thinking, where it's the 21st century and our politics is stuck back in the 20th somewhere.
And you are leading the way and showing us a new way forward and a new way of being. And so
I don't think of myself as leading us into a new way of being. I feel that a new way of being is coming up from the bottom of things. And I'm naming it within a political context. Harnessing it for political purposes. But that's what leadership is today. You're holding the space for the brilliance of others. You're not a top-down type of thing, you know.
Yeah, well, and I think that's beautiful about the way you are perceiving and articulating what you are, is that you're seeing the good and the power of the American people, and you're not perceiving them as bad or weak, which, quite frankly, I watch the news and I forget that when I look at how the news perceives people.
No, people are very smart. People are very good. We just have to speak into that and harness that for political purposes now. And we don't have time for other conversations We don't have time for all that silliness. We don't have time to think about the people who don't agree with us. We need to all be very serious about this now. The only question is, how do we harness this and how do we make it happen?
Amen to that. Amen to that. So, Marianne, what do you need from us to take this message forward? How can we support what it is that you're doing? How can we get on board? What is your request of us?
I hope people will go to my website, marianne2020.com. Check out those issues, the issue sections, because I think particularly so many people think, oh, she doesn't have issues. I have plenty of policy positions. Go to my Twitter, join me on Twitter, retweet my tweets. Go to my Instagram page, like my Instagram page. Go to Facebook, stay current with all the media, everything going on. Participate. Give money, because the one thing that's keeping me right now from being able to compete on the level that we need is the fact that where we can afford 2 or 3 or 4 people on a team, others can afford 20 or 25 on a team. So that's what money is for, and it's really, how many field organizers do you have in a state and so forth. So money and buzz, that's what politics is about.
Yeah.
So we have the public funding for federal campaigns, which we should have, and which I would definitely support as president. But until we get there, if people like this, I hope they'll send $5, $10, $50, whatever is right for you. And you can find out all of that at marianne2020.com. Like
Marianne.
This is not a time for cynicism. This is a time for everybody to get busy.
Yes. And I just want to, one final thing, I just want to go back and highlight something that you said about, the U.S. Department of Peace and why taking care of our children is so important. I think that's something that you have said again and again. And I think if people can really make this link, that taking care of our children and educating our people is one of the best investments we could make in our national security.
Think about the millions and billions and trillions of unrealized dollars simply due to the fact that we don't develop fully every child's brain. All that we need in order for there to be peace and prosperity in 20, 50 years from now is to help people thrive.
Let's help them thrive.
Let's help them thrive.
Yeah. Thank you, Marianne Williamson. I love you. I adore you. I respect you. I admire you. And I'm so grateful for the way you're showing up and all of the people that you're speaking on behalf, and all of us who you are speaking on behalf.
And I'm so grateful that you were using your platform to support me in this instance, and the friendship that I've always felt from you. And I'm excited to be walking this journey with you. Thank you, darling.